Today we're going to talk about a paper published by MIT that shows that while the popular ideas about left brain and right brain personalities are largely myth, the brain does meaningfully indeed divide labor between its hemisphere for visual spatial processing, in that each hemisphere primarily processes the opposite side of the visual field, and this division extends beyond early perception into higher level cognition such as attention and or memory. By splitting the visual information this way, the brain gains a bilateral advantage, allowing it to track more objects simultaneously across the visual field. Crucially, the hemispheres coordinated this process seamlessly, handing it off visual targets as they move along, much like a cell tower transferring a call, for example, such that perception remains continuous and stable, even though the spatial information is processed separately on each side of the brain. And at the end, we're going to also talk about how this way in which the brain processes and coordinates information might feed into the next generations of humanoids and or AI. The human brain has long been wrapped in mythology, in that popular culture divide people into left brain thinkers who are logical and analytical, and right brain thinkers who are creative and intuitive. Neuroscience, however, has steadily dismantled this notion. As Professor Miller at MIT puts it, nearly all of that narrative is nonsense. People do not think with half of the brain, they think with the whole brain instead. Yet, beneath this myth lies a real and far more fascinating principle. When it comes to visual spatial perception, for example, the brain truly does divide its labor between hemispheres, and it does so for a deeply functional reason. Visual perception is not an unlimited resource. At any moment in time, the brain can only process a finite amount of information from the environment. From an evolutionary standpoint, this creates a dangerous problem if too many perceptual resources are devoted to one region of space. Critical events in another region of the brain may be missed. A predator, for example, approaching from the left, or a falling object from the right hand side could escape awareness simply because the system is then overloaded. The brain solution is extremely elegant in that it assigns the right hemisphere primary responsibility for the left side of the visual space, and the left hemisphere primarily responsible for the right hemisphere. By splitting perceptual processing this way, the brain increases its overall capacity to monitor the world and reduces the likelihood of catastrophic blind spots. And for many years, neuroscientists believed that this division applied only to early stages of perception, and that the higher level cognition merged both sides into unified representation. But research over the last 2 decades had overturned that assumption. Experiments conducted by Professor Miller at MIT et al. Show that even in advanced brain regions such as the prefrontal cortex, which governs attention and working memory, spatial information remains strongly biased towards the hemisphere opposite the object's location. And neural activity recorded from these regions demonstrate that each hemisphere continues to operate with a surprising degree of independence even during very complex cognitive operations. The evidence for this division appears in the rhythmic electrical patterns of the brain, aka neural oscillation, aka brainwaves. When people attend to visual stimuli, gamma brainwaves frequency increase in the frontal regions of the hemisphere responsible for the opposite side of space. This activity reflects the allocation of attention and memory resources. The hemispheres are not simply mirroring one another, they are each running their own perceptual program on their own slice of reality, in essence. This architecture produces what neuroscientists call the bilateral advantage. When visual objects, for example, are distributed across both sides of space, people can track and remember more of them than when they all objects appear on one side only. And the benefit is real but not unlimited. Tracking several objects across both hemispheres is still harder than tracking a single object on either side. And human perception capacity remains constrained. Nevertheless, splitting the load allows the system per se to function far more effectively than a single unified processor could. Interestingly, the hemispheric divide applies almost exclusively to spatial information. Features such as color, shape, and texture are processed in both hemispheres. The brain has not divided the world, for example, by red and blue or circles and square. Instead, it has divided the world by where things are. So space, not form, is the currency of the system. And the division of labor raises a deeper question. If the brain maintains such a sharp separation of spatial processing, even at high levels of cognition, why does our experience of the world feel so seamless? We are not confused, for example, when a bird flies from the left side of our vision to the right. We do not notice any disruption at all when we shift our gaze and an object crosses from one hemispheric domain into another. Conscious experience flows, in other words, very smoothly. The answer lies in the brain's remarkable coordination between hemispheres. Neural measurements reveal that when a tracked object approaches the midline of vision, the hemisphere that is about to receive the object begins increasing its activity well before the crossing occurs. At the same time, the sending hemisphere continues to represent the object after it has crossed. For a period that can last more than a second, both hemispheres hold overlapping representation of the same target. Information is not abruptly transferred, it gradually is shared. The brain behaves like a pair of relay runners while briefly run aside side by side, for example, when passing the baton. This overlap prevents gaps in perception and perseveres continuity of experience for us. There is a slight performance cost during this handoff, which researchers can measure experimentally, but the cost is small compared to the benefits of maintaining a stable and unified conscious world. The system then favors coherence over efficiency, even while preserving the capacity gains of hemispheric specialization, for example. And this framework offers a striking example as to how the brain balances division and unity. At one level, it fragments the world onto parallel processing streams to maximize efficiency and safety. At another level, it weaves those streams together so tightly that we experience a single continuous reality around us. And the architecture is neither fully modular nor fully centralized. It is a dynamic compromise between specialization and integration. Understanding this organization has practical implication in that individual differences exist in how perceptual capacity is distributed across the visual field. Some people, for example, naturally handle complex spatial tasks more efficiently on one side rather than the other. And Professor Miller, in this case, measures and optimizes, for example, these differences for people engaged in visually demanding work, from pilots to surgeons to elite athletes, for example. And beyond application, these research studies reshape how we think about cognition itself. The brain is not a single process as running one unified program, but it's a cooperative network of semi-independent systems that trade information constantly while preserving their own domain of expertise. Conscious experience, for example, emerges not from uniformity but from coordination. And the enduring myth of left brain versus right brain thinking misses the true story that we just talked about. The real marvel is not that the brain is divided, but that division makes unity possible. Now, this architecture of divided yet coordinated intelligence offers a powerful biological model for symbiotic intelligence, which is the coordination and extension of biological intelligence and artificial intelligence. In that, in the human brain, intelligence does not arise from one single dominant processor, but from multiple specialized systems that remain partially independent while continuously exchanging information. Each hemisphere, in this case, as discussed, maintains its own perceptual responsibility, yet neither operates in isolation. This system only works because the hemispheres anticipate one another, share information during transitions, and persevere coherence at the level of the experience itself. This mirrors the core idea behind symbiotic intelligence, for example, in that human and artificial systems are not merged into one single entity, but instead function as complementary of cognitive patterns to one another. Each system retains its own strength, its own limitation, and its own modes of processing, while carefully designed interfaces enable smooth hands-off of information, responsibility, as well as control. In this sense, the brain, as well as the heart, provide a natural blueprint of the biosignals for building intelligent human AI systems that scale cognition without fragmenting it. Just as the hemispheres in the brain expand perceptual capacity through structured division and seamless coordination, along with the heart rate variability, for example, as additional biosignals, a symbiotic human machine system can expand problem solving capacity by distributing cognitive labor across biological and artificial agents. The success of such a system does not depend on eliminating boundaries, but on managing them with precision. Intelligence becomes an emergent property of the relationship itself, not of any single component of biosignals versus artificial signals. The lesson here, then, from neuroscience as well as from biosignals or biology is clear. The future of advanced intelligence lies not in replacing the human mind or the human biology, but in designing cooperative systems that, like the hemispheres of the brain or the heart rate as well as other biosignals, remain distinct yet profoundly interdependent. And that's all I had for today. Thank you all for sharing, commenting, and liking. And as always, I share the link of the research paper below. See you guys next time. Bye.